2015 Subaru STI, it's got much of the same stuff as the last model, and some say that's a bad thing. But is it really? So come back as our panel of usual knuckleheads who've driven it have something else to say. It's the new STI that's more than the sum of its parts. That's today on After Drive. The 2015 Subaru STI started disappointing its fans on day one. Its horsepower figure was stuck at 305 as it has been for nearly a decade. It had the same old port-injected 2.5-liter flat 4, not that newer direct-injected 2-liter that's given the new WRX its surprisingly punchy low end. Then there was the new body style, somehow neither weird enough nor sexy enough, and there was the lack of a hatchback, which sent some rally fans 6 over a crest of despair. But do the numbers and specs and pictures tell the whole story? I think this is the most significant STI in a decade, and here to tell me why I'm right or wrong is Jason Harper from Bloomberg News and Automobile Magazine, and yes, Travis Mikulski from Jalopnik, Deputy Editor, Deputy.
Yes, Deputy Editor.
So Barney Fife.
Yes, I'm the Barney Fife of Jalopnik.
Okay, exactly. So Subaru STI, let's talk about the history a little bit before we start this discussion, okay? So back in the 80s, Subaru created the Subaru Technica International STI division to handle motorsports, right? You guys remember this? In particular, the FIA World Rally Championship. Road cars followed, and the sporty Subaru Impreza WRX led on to the homologation Impreza WRX STI, small I.
It's true.
Right? And a man named Colin McRae and another man named Richard Burns, may they both rest in peace, made Subaru a hero car. And after 10 years of begging and stamping our feet, the U.S. finally got its first STI in 2004, about 5 minutes after we got the Mitsubishi Evo 8. Then in 2008, the second generation came along, matured a little bit, and perhaps disappointed some of the hardcore fans. But now we are in a truly new generation of STI. I love it. What do you guys think? Jason, Harper.
Well, no, it's interesting because there's sort of these two minds, right? There is this spec world, this sort of what everybody looks at the numbers, which are, well, thankfully, they did a whole new engine and it's got 500 horsepower, right?
Yeah, it's so much better this time around.
Well,
this V8 they put in there is unbelievable.
You're right, but it's weird because as every other car has, look at like a BMW M3, right? Used to have 200 and something horsepower, now it has like 890 or something, right? I mean, but look at the Subaru has had 300 horsepower basically for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then there's you get a chance to really go drive the car, which we did. Travis and I actually drove together, and you drove the next day. We drove in California on both real roads and also on Laguna Seca, which is a tremendously challenging racetrack. It's a chance to really shake that car out and get a sense of how good or bad it isn't.
Yeah.
And it's funny to look now back at everybody talking about the specs. There's a sort of war in the world of, the specs don't hold up. It's an old engine, which it is.
Yeah.
And then having driven the car and having actually, frankly, a different interpretation.
So let's look at the new car and what's changed in the new car compared to the old car. So frame, torsional rigidity is up 40%. This is
the big one. We'll come back to it.
We're going to come back to this because that doesn't seem like a real sexy thing to talk about, but it actually is. Yeah, so it's actually very
it's stiff,
sexy.
baby. Oh, it's
like
stiff.
more rigidity,
It's
right?
very stiff, yeah, actually. Steering, quicker ratio, it's gone from 15.1 to 13.1. It probably should have always been at 13, but we don't want to, we can talk about that forever.
Compared to the WRX's electric assist.
Exactly. It has
It is
retained
nice that's fantastic.
hydraulic. Exactly. It's got a little stiffer torsion bar, so you can feel ever so much more in your fine
That hard
somatic.
rod.
Yeah, exactly, that hard rod. It's got a little stiffer box mount bushings. That's all incremental stuff. Suspension, roll stiffness is up.
Yep.
14% more in the front, 10 in the rear. That actually does make a pretty big difference. We'll talk about that in a bit. It's got active torque vectoring now, so what that means is when you're cornering, in order to help the car rotate, it adds a little brake on the inside wheel and a little bit more torque on the outside wheel through the LSD, and it corners better. We'll talk about that too. ECU tuning, obviously quicker chips, better processing power, Means better boost control, accelerator mapping, quicker on
Which
the draw.
we talked about the accelerator mapping a lot. We'll get back to that.
We will actually.
Did you?
No, we
No, we
actually,
actually really did?
We had a
Very
long
good.
discussion about it. As a matter of fact.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. All right, brakes are kind of the same. 4-pot in the front, 2-pot in the back, Brembos, but a little bit better booster, larger master cylinder.
On fire most of the time.
Most
in
of
our
the time
experience.
Who actually
No,
was,
literally.
yeah,
Set
literally,
them
yeah.
on fire, yeah.
And thank God for that wing.
Exactly.
Because without that wing, you might get laid.
And where
So
else would
the
a crane
wing-
pick the car up from?
Yeah,
if you didn't have
exactly.
that wing? Yeah.
So the wing, basically adds about a
Street
sack
cred.
of potatoes of downforce at 100 miles an hour. So
It
I
means
don't
you
know.
can't see out the back at
Yeah.
all,
And
which
it's-
is helpful.
It's great. You think
know?
there's a car following you always.
all the time.
There is never a car behind you.
Exactly. New stuff in the interior. Sports seats are pretty good. It's got the new color multifunction display.
Inscrutable.
I
It's-
found it useless if I'm
Well,
honest.
it's got the
Inscrutable.
boost,
You
but it's
can't
got
see
the,
anything.
Well, it's got the boost gauge, which is kind of cool.
Well,
now.
it's,
What
it's
are you-
so
what are you
confusing.
looking
It's
at
this
it?
tiny. It's like,
Right.
it's like
Yeah, but
I'm staring at
hieroglyphics.
that while I'm driving.
Do you
I'm
remember-
I'm going to be hitting things.
But do you remember the original STI? It looked like Fast and the Furious. It looks like they had like put gauges on with bubble gum. Like
That's
it was,
awesome. With everybody like the 3 gauges on the A pillar.
Right, exactly.
The Greddy gauges or whatever.
Now
Yeah.
everything's in that little multifunction display. Harman Kardon stereo, pretty good,
Was it?
but
We never
nobody
turned it on.
I
listens
don't
to
think we
it
turned it on
because it has that.
because it was a car.
'Cause we're badass.
We're driving cars.
Yeah, you're badasses. But the other thing is,
We have an
it's-
acapella duet.
the thing it also has what I didn't write down here is it has the thing where it projects the sound into the cabin. It's got that thing that makes
But
you
at least it's not like the M5, which is fake sound.
right. It's real
Right,
sound.
It's like the CTS.
right. There's just a resonator that makes you
Which
able
is
to
okay.
hear.
I
it
find
in
that
the cabin.
fine. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're 27 and live at home with your parents, it's very affordable. Which is basically their. I mean, not to offend anyone, because if I was 27 and lived home with my parents, I'd probably buy this car.
I'm 27 and don't live with my parents, and I can't afford that car.
Well,
so
there you go. So you need to move out of
Mom's
New York
calling
City.
you right now.
Is she?
So 34,495. So that's about 35 grand. The launch edition, 1,000 of them were done. It's with the gold wheels. Remember the gold BBSs, the original?
Yeah, yeah.
And then they were all of a sudden.
Comes with a short throw shifter as well, which is
And a slightly different interior, blue accents instead of red.
right.
all right. Anyway, moving
But the
on.
short throw shifter is very, very cool. I would order that because it's good.
Okay.
Also, the limited comes with all the stuff for almost 40.
It's a little
grand.
heavier as well.
A little heavier.
So you are giving up.
Okay, so that's what's new.
So let's talk about
Let's
the
talk
bogey in
about
the
it.
room, which is the WRX.
Yes.
Right? And it's funny, I'm not so concerned about the specs until you actually look at the all-new WRX and realize, by all appearances in the spec sheet, they're shadowing each other.
Yeah.
So, and to me here, it comes down to this. The WRX is probably the better all-around car. If you want to live with the car, pick up people who don't want to beat you in the face after driving in the car,
Right.
pick up some groceries, and still be able to go on a back road.
Yeah.
I think probably the WRX is your
For
Huckleberry.
$8,200 less.
Well, everyone got into a huff about this when we kept saying it was $8,000, and that's because you're comparing a base WRX to a base STI, and the
With
STI
different
equipment,
equipment.
the
It's
STI
different
equipment would be
whatever.
more like a WRX Limited, so it's like a $5,000, $4,000
Yeah, it's
delta.
less.
But
Well-
the point is, I think that the WRX is the better value, and it is the better car. But if you're going to be modding the car to try and make it into an STI killer,
Right.
you're probably going to have to spend well over that delta because you have to change so many things. You still won't have the hydraulically assisted steering. You won't have the same all-wheel drive system. You won't
Torque
have.
vectoring.
You won't. Yeah, exactly. You'll have all the old.
Well,
you won't have as
but
many
that's
new things.
that's an important deal. The what you're getting with an STI is that rally robustness that always marked an STI, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got the inverted struts, you've got the DCCI, the the 3 diffs, right?
Yeah.
If you include the center
The,
diff, and the electronic.
it's electronic and mechanical. The center,
Right.
Which is.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, it's
all-
not fucking around. I would just say the STI
exactly what
is
it is,
not
right.
fucking around. This is a car. It's a hardcore car.
Very
Yeah.
much
And
so.
actually, it's so hardcore that you have to be hardcore enough to actually want that kind of rigidity.
Yeah.
When they were talking to us, this is more rigid, that's it. All that is, they're not kidding. This car
It's so stiff.
will beat, it
It'll
is so
beat you up.
stiff. It'll beat the shit out of you. When we push the car hard, I'm
Yeah.
sure you did too, it responds. It is that good, and that's what's amazing about it to me. It's so stiff that it does what you ask it to do. Now, would I want to drive it every single day or hear my mate complaining about?
Yeah.
Well, your mate's not getting in it, so it doesn't really matter.
well,
because it's an STI.
Well,
it's got
that's
the big wing
exactly
anyway,
right.
So
Well, that's the thing. It's still harsh on the road. Although the WRX isn't like not harsh on the road.
No, it's not like butter, but
It's not like butter.
No, but it's still.
They're not going to win any awards for smoothness in terms of ass-saving kind of, oh boy, aren't I comfortable.
Well, it's not an Accord thing.
It's not an
Right.
Accord.
That's what's
So,
cool.
but let's talk about what really is the thing about the STI. It's the handling. It's the way
It's
it
the
takes a
handling.
corner.
It's
the
the
way
handling.
it's become a very, very nimble car, right? And that stiffness makes a big difference, right? It doesn't twist when you go to take a corner, right?
No.
It's a car that doesn't have a lot of damping in the chassis at all. And the other thing is the torque vectoring.
Which is great.
Yeah.
When the car starts to break away, you know that it's about to break away. You know where the traction is. There's a sense that you can position the car, yet you can still play with the line. And that really comes from the torque vectoring. They
Yes.
put in basically all the expensive stuff they've done, all the amazing engineering is under the skin.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the big complaint that a lot of people have is because that great stuff isn't really obvious until you're out playing with it. You know,
Yeah.
you look at the specs and you go,
Yeah.
and you look at the engine and you go, come on, guys, like, what were you doing?
Yeah.
You drive the car, and I really do feel like you know then what they were doing. It's not sexy in that sort of, you know, that spec-heavy world we live in where, you know, it doesn't have that blockbuster appeal
Yeah.
of, we've got 460 horsepower
Right.
or, you know, a lot of torque.
Yeah.
But to drive the car at a place like Laguna,
Yeah.
you know, turn 2, it tells you so much.
So let's talk about it on the track. Well, and then we'll talk about it on the street, right? So you guys were together, and
Yeah.
you know I was on another day, but the thing that I noticed the most about it was the line correction, right? In the old days, an STI was great; it gripped a lot, but you know it wasn't about like you couldn't really correct mid corner in the same way you can with this car, and it's a lot of it has
Go
to do
sideways.
with
You could
well,
go
you can
sideways.
just go sideways, exactly. I mean, it's, you know, because basically it handled differently off throttle than it did on throttle. There were all kinds of things about the all-wheel drive system back then that have been corrected. Not only is the system more responsive by just the software and the hardware is better, but now that you've got the torque vectoring, you can adjust that stuff that used to really vex you in
Yeah.
the middle of a corner with the STI.
Did you
know.
find that? I mean,
I mean, I found if I got on the power, jump on the power too early in the corner, it's the front end still washes out, right?
Right.
But if you let off the gas just a little bit, all of a sudden the rear end comes around, brings you back, shoots you out of the corner. In
Right.
the old days, it was known to be more of an understeering sort of car, and if you were
Right.
on the power, it was going to stay understeering the whole way through the corner.
Right.
It's much more adjustable now, and I think it was amazing. on
Right,
the
when
track.
you were off power, it would throw you out to the outside of the turn, and then when
wash.
you were back on power, then you could
Yeah.
maybe steer it in a little bit. But that's the thing: off throttle cornering is just a mind-blowing thing if you're used to the old STI way.
you know, luckily we get to spend a good amount of time at Laguna Seca, and it's so interesting to drive different cars there. And you know, you drive an all-wheel drive 911, you can get on the power early as you're on the curbing in Laguna. You could do that with a McLaren at Laguna. Most cars, most big heavy, particularly rear engine or rear wheel drive cars, you've got to be real patient and thread back on. What I found with the STI is you can get on the power early in the curbing. Coming out of the long straight into turn 2, which is that kind of hairpin, that's sort of, it's a double compromise turn. I got on too early one time. And it's a good place to wash out. You know, you go in the dirt. It's not.
Well, there's a lot of there's also a bunch of lines you can take. You can take the late turn and you
but
can
I
do
mean,
an
as
early
you
turn
come
to double
out to
apex.
the far curbing,
Yeah.
I was wrong. I was like, well, I got a little too much on power, and I readjusted. And sure enough, that was the one time that I really felt the torque vectoring, and it saved my bacon right there.
Yeah.
You know, I would have just dropped a wheel, but nonetheless, it was the one time I was really aware of that system saying, and,
Right.
and I've got a video of it. It goes, but you know, I came out looking fine, and
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Well, so that's the thing. So McLaren used. So this is the braking torque vectoring they use. And by the way, in the STI, it's only front wheels, which is all you kind of need. You just need a little bit of drag brake on that inside wheel. But McLaren uses that. McLaren has an open diff
Yeah.
on its car, and on the 12C, and you know it has that brake steer. It does the same thing. Porsche uses the same thing. Audi uses it, and Ford with the
With their
Fiesta ST.
Fiesta ST. Although some are more intrusive, that I do feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, correct me, that they do send, like the Subi does send extra torque to the outside wheel, where some of them just heavily brake.
So wait, it does have an actual, like, I thought it was the rear wheels that would do more torque to the outside. Am I wrong? Or not, none at all. I thought it was only braking, honestly.
They said in the press release, torque apportioning also.
That's what I thought. But,
But-
Okay.
I don't-
I could,
but-
be just
but
thinking
it's
of, I
all-
could just be thinking of the WRX.
But it's
then.
straight mechanical. It's nothing,
it's not sensors.
it's not sensors, right,
It's-
exactly.
Because the center diff is both mechanical and electronic.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And that's another thing, right? So it's the same old DCCD center diff thing, right? A few years ago, they went from, it used to be 65 rear, 35 front, right? In the torque split. And now it's,
I think it's 9. It's 9, right?
in
To the rear.
In 2008, they changed it to 4159.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this has the same, so it's not any different. It's a little bit quicker reacting because of the faster ECU. But it's a weird system anyway, because it's the combination of a locked ratio and slipped clutches so that you can kind of approximate other ratios.
Well,
you
there's
know.
all the different things that you can choose yourself, right? I mean,
There's
they
so
said,
many.
they said us, you know, during in the presentation they said, well, in this situation, we think you should probably use this, and
Yeah.
you know, this
Yeah.
combination of, and you know, meanwhile, I'm thinking, this is my job, and half the time I'm going,
I just want to
when
drive.
should, yeah, what are we using in this situation? You know,
Yeah.
the ability to play with a diff manually is kind of a strange idea. I like the idea that, it's
mean,
sort
it's
of
a
a
great
romantic
option,
idea, but
Yeah.
but how many of us are really going to be out there playing with that? I don't know.
I just left it in when we were in the track because I put the diff in minus, I think it was, and the
Which is the smoothest,
and
right?
the smoothest one, and then on the acceleration and the throttle mapping, I left it in either intelligent or sport, but never sport sharp.
Sport Sharp is almost too
So is Sport.
aggressive.
Yeah, it's erratic.
Sport is pretty aggressive too.
Because well, they show you the throttle graphs on the car, right?
Yeah.
And so they have a linear progression for intelligent, and then like a giant mountain for sport, and then it's like straight up for Sport Plus.
Yeah.
And I understand that that's great for throttle response, but when you're on a racetrack or when you're doing precision stuff on back roads, you want to have that adjustability in the throttle, so you can be at half throttle, and it's actually half throttle. You don't want to be at half throttle and have the response of full throttle, because that gets rid of the whole point. You want to have
Right.
a progressive pedal.
I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, I actually
You're
thought
wrong.
sport, I thought sport was linear. And I
No.
thought that,
No, it's
that
not.
the intelligent was sublinear.
You
No,
know, it's
sport-
sublit now.
And Sport Sharp is
when-
superlinear.
When I wrote about saying an intelligent was the time, I did get some flack online. No matter what I'd write, I'd get some
okay.
flack online. But the people were saying that the
Because you were faking it. You were faking it, weren't you? It was
was-
all fake.
it was all fake.
You never drove the STI at all.
Never drove
I
the
was there. He wasn't driving the STI. It was a cardboard cutout.
Yeah, no. So, but apparently, it also makes parts. The ECUs also start to react when you're in intelligence. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
not. It's on a linear graph, but it's also slower to react than normal. So you'd have to be driving it like a really heavily turbocharged car, where you have to get on the throttle real early in the corner to make sure
Is that
you
true?
get the full power.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
what I was told.
But
So-
Sport Sharp, what you find is you're getting weight transfers that you're not actually asking
Yeah.
for, because it's like
Yeah.
And
when you
mismatched
want to
downshifts,
when you want to
too.
blend in, you're unwinding and you want to come in nicely,
Mm-hmm.
tip in. The Sport Sharp sucks. I think, and I don't think it's
does.
just Subaru. I think a lot of these manufacturers doing it. I think it's like, it's Sport Sharp. It must be
It's-
faster. It's not
No,
faster.
I just
It's
want
basically
one
it's-
throttle map,
yeah,
and it's a
it's stop-
linear responsive
Yeah,
map. That's all I need.
It's not that hard to press my foot.
It's stoplight mode. I mean, it's
I mean,
just.
do you have a club foot? I mean, do you have gangrene, gout? What's your problem here? You know?
see a physician then and get it
Yeah,
worked
yeah,
out, so
let's,
that
you
way
know.
we can get you in the right car.
Right. But you're right. I mean, you don't need anything more than sport. The sports setting. This is the SI drive, right? So it's
Yeah.
middle position SI drive.
So I do think then it brings us to the engines. And,
Yes.
and I thought Road and Track actually took the WRX and the STI separately and
Yes.
dynoed them. And I thought this was illustrative. This was interesting. And it basically showed the 2.0 from the WRX basically just had a lot more torque
Yeah.
a lot earlier and developed a lot more horsepower much earlier. And about 4,000 RPM in both graphs, the STI and the WRX crossed. But
Yeah.
that was kind of wild.
Yeah.
Well,
that's-
you're right. You know what's interesting about? I mean, you get the feeling that the WRX was the spotlight. Like everybody who did the development of the WRX were in the spotlight, and there was like one guy over in the corner, like under a buzzy bulb, that was kind of with his glasses, doing the STI, and then everybody else was doing WRX because WRX is a quantum leap forward.
Yes, it's fantastic.
I think the STI is a quantum leap forward also, but it's a conglomeration of smaller things. The STI, that 2-liter is fantastic. It's the direct injection too.
It's all the rage these days.
All
The kids are talking about
All the kids are
and
talking
that's
about.
the FA. By the way, that's the BRX's engine.
BRZ.
BRX. What am I? Was this like a Lincoln? What am I talking about? So the BRZ motor with the on the WRX, the turbos are on the underneath, right? That's how they do it.
Right.
And that's why it can't
fit in the BRZ.
fit in the BRZ.
tall.
That's why the first question we asked was, can you put the WRX motor in the BRZ and make it a WRX BRZ? Too many letters.
I would just love to see the STI have a version of this engine, of the
Yeah.
WRX engine, hotted up. I could even have 305 horse, but the responsiveness of the WRX motor.
And there it is.
Yeah.
It's
I
just-
don't
that's
need
it.
400 horsepower.
I want drivability. I want usable torque. I want usable power. And I feel like, the EJ, it's a great motor, but it's been around for 10 years. There's something better. Subaru has it. It's
Yeah.
sitting in the car below this
Well, that's
one.
what's so odd.
They could
Yeah.
they could have honestly, if they put the WRX motor in an STI, no power increase, but with all the suspension rigidity and all those mods they made,
Yeah.
it's still a leap forward for the car.
2 years, I guarantee you, 2 years you're going to see the FA in the STI. And I don't know that for sure, but
But I agree
it's
with
not
that.
going to be next year, but it'll be the year.
Well,
after.
and a reflash. I mean, it's really a reflash away from added everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah, there's some other, there's probably some internals they'd have
yeah,
to do
there's.
too.
I mean,
but
it does. And direct injection. I mean, this is still the old port injected. EJ.
no. I mean, that's what I mean. If you put the
They took
2.0.
this motor, I think, of a
Oh,
tractor
yeah.
in 1995 and then put it into a Subaru. Because it sounds like a tractor motor. It really, I mean, there's something great about that sound, right? But
Yeah.
there's also something great about a really good engine. That's what the WRX
Well,
has.
it's funny. I think Subaru would be getting a lot less flack if with the 2.5 if they hadn't really just released the WRX
Right.
with the 2.0. And it's
That's
hard
the-
not to look at those two. Because I'll be honest, I didn't feel like it was lacking in power when we were driving it.
Not
I
at
don't
all.
think
No.
you and I looked at each other and went, this is wimpy. Any moment I was like, God,
No, it was the only thing we did talk with the gear ratios.
the gear ratios
are off.
sometimes didn't make me happy in that, particularly on the really windy short sections.
Right, because you want to be in third, but third is such a short gear.
It should-
Yeah.
Second, you'd run out, and third, it wasn't quite.
It just
wasn't quite
wasn't
there.
working for you.
Yeah, it wasn't working for us.
So you need a taller second, or you need a shorter third, or a taller third.
I think you need a taller third.
You need
I
a
think
taller third.
I want third is my workhorse gear. I want.
Yeah, I
third
want
to-
right.
Well,
You want third to
like,
last,
It's
yeah.
it's almost a Porsche Cayman gear. Like it's
Right.
so happy on winding roads.
That's
that,
true.
it's just
That's
ha-
the difference. That's interesting because you're right. Third gear in a Porsche Cayman, you don't need any
It's
other
beauteous.
gear.
It's
Like
a
you
beauteous
need two
thing.
gears,
Yeah,
like first and
like
third.
yeah,
And that's it.
First-
That's it. First to get going and third just to bomb
just to be
around.
happy.
Yeah, that's it. No, seriously though.
Yeah.
I do think it's important to say, and because a lot of people haven't got to drive the STI yet, it's a great car.
But
I
you
mean,
need
I
to
think
drive
it's a
it, but you need to drive
hardcore
it.
sports car.
Yes.
In a really old school way. I mean, if you're looking, if you would love to buy the 911 4S but can't afford it, I think, you get in this car and roar around and be really happy.
Yeah.
Unless, you're looking for an everyday car, and then it's not going to make you happy. What they've done is made the STI hardcore.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think to me, that was the takeaway, is that
Yeah.
this is a real sports car for all it's good and all it's bad,
Yeah.
in a way that it felt flabby and a little not so serious last
It really,
generation.
but it really brought back the hardcore because the first generation
That's what I'm
was
saying.
a
Last
hardcore
generation
car.
was flabby.
And the
little,
last generation felt like they were trying to make it too mature, like they were trying to get an older crowd. And they got away from the 27-year-olds who live in their parents' basement. I mean, like that's who. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's who you want. You want those guys that will spend everything
Hours
they
on
have
Naziok
and
talking
hours
about
on
the
Naziok,
cars.
right? And will spend everything they have on the hardcore sports car,
Right.
And that's what it is. It really.
But-
But all right. So in the end, WRX is 25, 26, 27 with tax and out the door, kind of. 27 grand. STI is 35 to 38. Which one do you buy?
It's really tough because there's so much about the WRX I like, and it's such a value. But with the STI, you get better all-wheel drive system, better steering, better rubber, better wheels out of the box,
More robust gear. shifting.
better gearbox.
Yeah,
I
you get
think.
the rod.
direct gearbox.
Yeah, you get the rod
Um,
parallel, whatever they call.
better seats, all that
Seats
stuff.
are comfortable.
Seats were great, and they had
Yeah.
Alcantara on them, which is God's
Wow.
fabric. And if I'd probably go for a base STI, honestly, and
Yeah.
then swap in a.
I'll be honest. If I knew I could get it in a hatchback, it would be
Oh,
such
we didn't talk about
We
that.
didn't talk about the hatch, and I will say that, man, I do like the hatch. I mean, I hate to belabor it, but if I could buy that baby in a hatch, it would be a much easier.
I feel so bad for Subaru.
By
'cause
the
they're
way-
like, oh, we're only going to build this in a hatchback. Why aren't you building a sedan? Then they build a sedan, and then they build a sedan and a hatchback. Everyone's happy. They build
Baby,
a
what
sedan.
happened?
Like, where's our hatchback? And it was what was it? It was 50%? No, it was 20-something% of STIs were hatchbacks
Yeah.
when they were.
It wasn't a
operating
huge
as
take
hatchback.
rate.
Yeah.
So the people that are complaining should shut up
and go buy
they
the
should just
old
be-
generation?
they buy the old generation, or just be happy we're getting an STI. at
Right.
all.
Well, and there is something to be said for that. It's not a huge market, and I'm really pleased that Subaru. This is their Halo car, and it's a genuine Halo car in the sense that, like I said, it performs so well.
Yeah.
That it did as good as it did on Laguna Seca shocked me. I expected it to kick ass on rally-like roads like Carmel Valley Drive, where we drove it. It should be great there. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was on Laguna Seca, which is the kind of track which shows up a car's every deficiency. And I saw your goofy ass grin. This guy looked like Bert or
From
Ernie
Bert and Ernie.
from
It was a great day.
It was a
Well, we
great
were only
day.
supposed to get 2 sessions, and somehow
Well,
Jason here
because-
worked out about 14
Because
sessions
track
on
whores are us over
I had
here.
track cards. I know the way to get the most laps out of any
You just
media
stand
day.
right there, ready to
If
get.
you
that's
were
it.
not in the car, I am. It's
Right,
just that
exactly,
simple.
yeah.
If there were cars sitting there and Jason was in one, I saw one behind, I'm like, well, Jason's
Yeah,
in a
well,
car. I might as well
obviously.
be in a car too. And that was it.
And the point being, though, is I have been in some cars that you think, I've kind of got it. I'm not sure if I want to take another 15 laps. If they'd given us another 15 laps, in
I'd been
STI,
there all day.
I would. Well, we
I would have
we
rather
were.
been
I
there
mean,
all
basically,
day,
the sun went down, and they
Yeah.
were.
That's the thing about the car. I didn't want to leave it either, and that's you don't want to
Boom.
get out of it,
Boom.
and that's the key.
Boom.
That's the key to a good car.
You could give me another 40 horsepower, but you know what?
So you would say STI over WRX, you'd pay the extra money.
I think yes, I would.
Yeah. So I would too, because of it's just a more robust platform. It's just a better car. It's got all of those things. WRX is a good value. It's a fantastic performance value in the same way the Ford Fiesta ST is a great performance value. But ultimately, the STI is in such another league in
Yes.
terms of build quality and just stuff.
It's a good thing to be spoiled for choice.
Yeah.
Kudos to Subaru for giving us some good choices.
Exactly.
So.
One last thing, the design. We haven't talked about the design. Does
They
it-
designed it?
Yeah.
Well, the 2008 Evo looks great. No, it looks.
Damn.
I think it looks good. I think with especially launch edition blue, gold wheels, big wing. It's exactly what I'd want. I mean, I don't care enough about the way it looks. I care about how it drives, and it looks fantastic.
It's fugly.
It drives
But
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do?
I like it better. I think it's better looking than the WRX just because
That's not
I think
hard.
it looks better with the wheels pushed out.
And the big wing.
How does
big
she
one.
look? Mostly out of this eye.
Wow. And on that note, that's After Drive for today, the Subaru WRX. What do you guys think of it? We want to know. And Travis Okulski, Jason Harper.
So will we see you soon?
Yeah, well, we're going to go on hiatus. After Drive will be off for a few weeks, but hopefully we'll be back soon talking more about cars that you want to buy, that we want to buy, and that we all want to drive. What do you
Fun
think?
could be had.
Yes, fun to be had. Okulski, say goodbye, Travis.
Drive.jalopnik.com, Twitter.com/drive, Facebook.com/drive.tv, Instagram.drive.net.internet, Friendster.com/drive, Classmates.com
MySpace?
/drive, MySpace.com/JF Musical, JF Musical.
And Yahoo.
Yahoo.
AOL.
Yeah.
That's it.
Hit us up on AIM.
And
at-
prodigy.angelfire.org.
Yes. And
See you
save the
guys later.
Enzos.
And save the Enzos.
Bye.
Later.